Hi, everyone. Welcome to our third session in the uh, Spiritual Foundations of Emotional Healing. So, I apologize that in the last recording I said I'd see you next week. I forgot that we were having a week break, and so some people were confused, but we're back again. Our third lesson. And this time I have some audiovisual resources. Um, I just barely got the few slides up, in the member area, so you can actually review them. I also made a link to them within the actual presentation. I think there's a place where you can look and you can find file sharing on your menu, and I'll share that. So if any of you want to download and follow along, you can do that. So anyway, the previous sessions I haven't gotten too much into the actual process of what I was learning to do in emotional healing. So tonight I'm going to kind of get into that process. But before I do, I want to kind of give you another spiritual interpretation of what's going on to kind of help you understand it a little bit better. When I started doing this work, we rapidly discovered that when a person became very intensely real with themselves, in other words, when they were like right in the middle of really acknowledging and feeling the pain or the frustration or the sadness or the anger or whatever they had inside, and they were real about it. They weren't trying to run away from it. They weren't trying to hide from it. They weren't trying to project it on other people. They were owning, this is where I'm at. This is where I feel. That we could say, look for a light. Look for light in this situation. Look for light in this feeling, whatever. And very often they would have this ability to suddenly kind of access this light inside, and encouraging them to go into that light, they would find the answers to their problems. I didn't give it to them. They found it for themselves. Now, that wasn't always the case. As I'll explain tonight, people process this emotional work differently. So sometimes, it just goes into a feeling rather than actually having any kind of visual experience. Somebody posted a story online in the class page, about some experiences with healing and just kind of connecting with things inside of them, but not necessarily having any visual images. So visual images aren't necessary to do this work. They're just one doorway of access. But because I was seeing this thing that when the people got real is when the kind of, opening up occurred, I was also interested in the fact that I was doing this with people of multiple different religious persuasions. And so I had noticed that their religion kind of would alter the way they would perceive this, but nonetheless, it didn't matter what their religious belief was, or even if they had particularly a religious belief, that they would still make some kind of connection with an inner light and sense of divine love or peace, and get answers to some of the things that were troubling them, irregardless of what their belief system was, for as long as, and again, this is the critical factor, that they were willing to actually go in and really acknowledge what was going on inside of them, and get honest with themselves about it. Now, a lot of times people have such painful stuff inside that they're not ready to go there. They won't go there, and you can't force them to go there. They've got to be ready to do this. And one of the things that right early on I recognized was different in what I was being led to do. It was different from almost anything I ever said. I started looking around for resources. Is there anybody else doing this? Is there anything I can find to help me understand what's going on? And I just found there was this real dearth of material, because almost everything that I saw where people were talking about emotional healing, they were actually talking about trying to get rid of emotions, trying to get rid of the bad feeling, trying to get rid of the hurt, trying to get rid of the pain, trying to erase it away. I even had some people in some classes, argue you don't have to do this. You don't have to engage with your emotions. You just can, look at them from a distance and make them go away, and so on and so forth. And I just wasn't finding that to be true. So I was doing a lot of things that, traditional psychology or counseling would say, don't do. One is I was touching people. Two, I was actually empathizing with people and emotionally feeling with them, sometimes crying with them or feeling angry with them or kind of sharing the emotional experience with them. And the third thing is I was encouraging them to actually feel it, not to try to make it go away, but just to be present with it, to recognize it, know it. And these, really amazing things were happening with that. And so actually one of the first resources I found to help me understand what was going on was actually a friend of mine was telling me about research he was doing into studying the ancient Hebrew temple, the temple of King Solomon, and the structure of it. And he was describing to me about how you had the outer court, or the court of the Gentiles, and there they had vessels of brass, and then you went into the middle court and you had this altar where the priests offered sacrifices, and then you had a big font where the priests washed themselves on the back of 12 oxen, and then they used vessels of silver, and then the high priest would go into, after doing a ritualistic purification, would then go into the very inner court, which was divided into two parts by a veil, a piece of fabric hung there, so it wasn't really two rooms. It was just, a thin parting between two parts of the room. And the where the high priest would go was vessels of gold, and he would go there to commune with God, because this was the house of God. This is where God dwelt, and he was on the other side of the veil. And my friend Royland Morton said that he would go in and speak the name of God, and which, by the way, is the name Moses gave, the I am name. And in case God appeared and smote him dead, they would tie a rope around the high priest's leg to drag him out. I thought that was very interesting. My friend Royland told me that. But in other words, and as he was describing this, the little spiritual voice inside says, well, you're the temple of God. That's a description of what's inside of you. And I suddenly realized what we were really doing is we were guiding people on an inward journey to where God dwelt in the center of their own being, if you understand. In other words, if the idea that ye are the temple of God and God dwells within you, then the idea was that you are that temple. And the way you find God is not somewhere out there. It's somewhere in the secret chamber in the center of your own being. And so I'm going to show you some slides here to kind of illustrate these ideas. And so we'll start off with one of the things that I had realized early on was that we were like threefold beings. We have we have three chambers in our body, literally three chambers inside of ourselves. One chamber is up in there in our skull. That houses our brain. There's another chamber in our chest that houses our heart and lungs. There's another chamber in our belly that houses our liver, our pancreas, our stomach, our small and large intestines, also our kidneys and reproductive organs. And the lower chamber and the middle chamber are separated by a membrane, the diaphragm, a muscle, the muscle that controls breathing. And so I realized this threefold nature is described, in many different aspects of psychology or whatnot, as like the parent, the adult and the child, the ego, the superego, and the id in Freudian psychology, body, mind, spirit, There are also the worlds of contraction, expansion, equilibrium, which I'm not going to talk about tonight, but energetic worlds of these things. And so I'd come to realize, that this was, symbolic of our threefold nature. And people often talk about the body-mind connection. Well, the body-mind connection is the heart world. The heart world is the world of our emotions. Our world is the world of our feelings, our love and grief and pain. Although we do have feelings as in bodily sensations in the physical area of our body, most of our what we think of as emotions, really feelings that we have towards other people, are experienced in the upper chest cavity going down into the area of the solar plexus where these two worlds overlap. And so I had already seen this particular idea of the model, and then I realized that that what you were seeing in this temple model is the same three worlds, only they're in basically concentric rings. The outer world is the world of our physical body. It's the physical life in which we're living. In the ancient Hebrew, this is where what's called the court of the Gentiles. This is where Jesus went and taught. I mean, teachers would stand in the outer court and teach. This was also where the money changers were located that Jesus drove out of the temple. Okay. Which is also, I think, significant. And then you go to the middle court. Like I said, that was where there was the altar where you offered the sacrifice. And I had come to understand that, the sacrifice that God really wants out of us is a broken heart and a contrite spirit. Broken means cracked open, really. Okay. An open heart and a humble, another way of saying contrite is humble spirit. And that I realized this was our emotional world. This was symbolic of the emotional world, which I think might in some traditions, and don't get hung up on words. I really don't like to get hung up on words. You use whatever words appeal to you, but it's kind of the soul world. There's a lot of spiritual teachers who say that the soul and the spirit are two different things. But this is the world that links the higher consciousness or the spiritual thing, or what some people call the higher self, with the physical body. And it's linked through emotions, because thoughts don't become actions in the physical world without the help of emotions. Emotion is what animates life. It's our life energy. We do the things we do because our emotions give us the motivation, the emotion, the energy set in motion to actually perform physical things. Everything we do is motivated by emotions, whether we recognize it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not. And even people who think that they're really, really logical, okay, all you need to do is just very calmly and quietly and with reason, present some challenges to their thinking and hypotheses. And, if they find that they can't prevail against you logically, watch where they go. They'll become very emotional, very angry. They'll call you names. They'll start, trying to belittle you, everything, because their emotions are what is really motivating them. That's, again, their thoughts are attached to their feelings, which creates beliefs, which then the beliefs motivate all our actions. All of our actions are motivated by our beliefs. Our beliefs are our ways of being and living. And so they're the thoughts and ideas that we have that are attached to the emotions that bring them into physical manifestation. Anything that we believe, we act on. You can have a thought or an idea that you don't act on because there's no emotion attached to it. If there's a negative, painful emotion attached to a thought, you'll probably avoid something. If there's a positive emotion attached to a thought, you'll go after it. And it doesn't matter whether the actual end result makes you happy or sad or feel good or whatever. It's the fact that there's a linkage inside of you in your belief system that either causes you to be attracted to something or to avoid it. All right. And that's the middle world. Well, this idea of hardening our hearts. All right. We go into, we in this world, we face a lot of difficulties and challenges and so forth, that and we get assaulted, and we start to feel like we've got to protect ourselves. And so, like I talked about in the last session, we go and we try to hide what's going on in here, because it scares us. We've got pain in there. We've got suffering in there. So in order to protect ourselves from having to feel that, we harden our heart. We build a basically wall around that part of ourselves, so we don't have to face the pain we feel there. We don't have to face the sadness we feel there. We don't have to face the anger we feel there, so on and so forth. Well, the problem is, okay, that as we close ourselves off from that, we're also closing ourselves off from that higher consciousness, that spiritual center where we have communion with our Father. I think this is what Jesus referred to when he says, the Father within, he does the works. In other words, I don't do this. The Father within does this. The kingdom of God is within you. All right. And so we can't really communicate with God. We're looking out in the world for solutions, but we're walled off from going in because it's difficult and painful. Like I said in the very first session, if you just think about being forced into a situation where you have to just sit with yourself. You have no TV, no cell phone, no nothing to entertain you, and you just have to go out and sit in the woods for a couple of days, like Native people did on a vision quest, or like Jesus did when he goes out in the wilderness for 40 days, or Moses did it too, went out fasted in the wilderness for 40 days. You're going to face your demons. All of the stuff inside of you that you don't want to deal with is going to start bubbling to the surface because you're forced to confront it. You can't distract yourself with it, from it by keeping yourself busy or constantly, trying to entertain yourself or numb yourself with all kinds of food and drugs and activities. You're going to have to start confronting that, and we don't want to confront that. We want to make it go away. We don't want it. We don't want to have to deal with it. We just want it to go away. It's just, and this is where I had realized this is very much like allopathic medicine, that wants to treat the symptoms of your problem without ever trying to understand or fix the cause. And it doesn't work. You can't do it. And you can't understand the cause if you're running away from the feeling, because the feeling is not the problem. The feeling is the messenger trying to tell you you've got a problem. Just like the physical symptoms of disease are messengers trying to tell you you've got a problem. They aren't the problem. The runny nose isn't the problem. Throwing up isn't the problem. Diarrhea isn't the problem. High cholesterol isn't the problem. High blood pressure isn't the problem. Depression isn't a problem. They're not the problems. They're the symptoms. They're the messengers saying you've got a problem. Your problem lies in, the way you're living, the way you're eating, what you're being exposed to, the way you're thinking, the way you're feeling. Well, it's the same thing in the emotional world. The sadness you feel, or the grief you feel, or the pain, or the pain you feel, or the anger you feel, are messages saying you have a problem. No, they're not saying that your spouse has a problem, that your children have a problem, that the world has a problem. They're saying you have a problem, and you have to learn to go in and listen to them and let them teach you what the problem is and where it's coming from, so you can do something to deal with it. So this turning inward, okay, is what this work is all about. It's going through that process, and that sacrifice, see, is basically being willing to take all that pain and suffering and put it on the altar and say, okay, God, I give this to you. I give it as a sacrifice to you. Do with it. The fountain of water on the back of the oxen and the fire on the altar are symbolic of the baptism of water and of the Spirit, of being cleansed and purified or released from all that stuff, so that you can, like the high priest, go into the inner court and you commune with your Father, and know his love and have his help. But your whole life, you're told, Don't trust any of that stuff. Don't listen to what other people say. Listen to what other people tell you, because you can't trust what's inside of you. What's inside of you is wrong. You're going to be deceived. You're going to be, whatever. Well, I learned it wasn't true. I learned that when you go inside, you will always encounter good answers. Good, you'll encounter this love and light if you can get through the middle garbage. Okay. And that's the trick, because like I said, we don't want to do this. Okay. We don't want to take up our cross. We don't want to have to feel this stuff. We want it just to magically go away so we don't have to deal with it. But as I learned, right from the beginning, the only way out of it is through it. You have to wade through the fire to let it do its purifying work, so that you can get back to your source and have this. We'll talk about this process over and over again in multiple ways, but this is one of the best models I've ever seen of what it is we're trying to do. We're trying to get people to stop looking outside of themselves for answers, and instead go inside and start to feel and sense and know what's going on inside of them and deal with it. Now, this is a model I encountered many, many years later, which I think also describes this in just a slightly different way. All right. And what this model shows is these three aspects of our being, again, in a little different light, in more like a psychological aspect of this. We have this public self. Now, the public self is this self that we're trying to project to the world, because we want people to like us. We want to be accepted. We want to get along. So we learn to adopt certain behaviors and certain cultural norms and ways of dressing and other things to find acceptance in the world, right? We learn to brush our teeth and comb our hair and put on nice looking clothes and smile or whatever. Or maybe if that doesn't work, we figure, okay, we find that maybe the bad kids accepted us, and so we adopt, bad behaviors so that we can be accepted by the bad kids, because we want somewhere to find, love and acceptance in this life. And so we put on this little facade, this little mask, and we play this little game with each other. And meanwhile, there's stuff down inside of us that we're not saying anything about, that we're not speaking up about or say, because number one, we know what might hurt people, or it would be offensive, or they wouldn't like us anymore, or we think, if they knew who I really am and what I've really done and what I've really been through, or if I showed some of my genuine emotions, they'd immediately reject me. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting there working with someone and we touch on something, and they start to say, and they go, I'm sorry. And I'm going, what are you sorry for? In other words, think about this. We are feeling sad, and we let our feelings show, and we apologize for showing our feelings, right? As if this is some evil, wicked, horrible thing to be in pain and to be crying. Where do we get that from? It's from the judgments we face in the world of all the other people who are living off the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and living in judgment and judging everybody and condemning everybody and telling everybody, you're wrong and I'm right, and your opinions are stupid and my opinions are right. Your way of dressing is dumb and my way of dressing is right. And your religion is wrong and my religions are, and on and on and on and on and on and on. Right. I mean, isn't this true? Think about it. How would you feel if right now, instantly, everybody could read all of your thoughts and know everything that's going on inside of you and everything you've ever done? Some of the things maybe that you're not so proud of. It's terrifying, isn't it? Terrifying. The rejection, the ridicule that you might get from other people, the judgments they might heap on you, the anger, the shaming finger of how dare you? I mean, how could you have done that? How could you think that? What's wrong with you? Right? And so we live in this kind of constant fear of, oh, gosh, all this stuff is in there, and we think, part of us knows that what we're putting on the outside is kind of maybe a little bit of a facade, and we're not that good, and we're not that perfect, and whatever. Maybe we learn to puff ourselves with an ego to try to, hey, this is what the ego is all about, to try to make ourselves feel better, because down inside we know, maybe I'm not attractive, I'm worthless, I'm stupid, I'm whatever, blah, 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 all this going on inside of ourselves. That's a negative self. The truth of the matter is that's not our real self either. Okay? That's this mask, this wall, this gunk we've built up in our middle chamber of our being, what I'm calling the soul aspect of ourselves. And the idea that God breathes our spirit into us and it joins our body and they become a living soul, like the soul becomes this bridge between our spirit and our body, is what I'm saying. And I don't know if that's theologically correct, but I'm just using it as a metaphor. Understand, this is all metaphor. This is metaphor pointing to an experience, not towards an intellectual understanding of something. This is one thing I have to try to say over and over again. And it's one of the reasons why, it's a little difficult to teach this, is because, words and semantics and backgrounds and everything trying to get in the way. And it's much easier to guide a person to do it than it is to explain how you do it. But I'm just doing my best to try to explain this. So when that person goes, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm crying, you go, it's okay. Feel it. It's okay to cry. There's nothing wrong with it. You give them permission to cry. I remember this workshop I did, and it was a very interesting one, because I got to speak at a kind of a new age bookstore in California with an audience that only one person in the audience had ever heard me before, which was kind of unique, because usually I'm speaking to audiences where at least a large percentage of people have heard me before. But this was an audience people never heard me before. And I was talking about emotional healing, about my book, The Heart's Key to Health, Happiness, and Success. And as I was talking about this, there was this woman on the left side of the room, second row, and she started to cry. She burst into tears, and as she burst into tears, I felt the entire room tense. Like everybody in the room was like, "What do we do now? What do we do now? What do we do?" Because we don't know how to deal with this. And we don't know how to deal with it because we don't know how to deal with it inside of ourselves. If we knew how to deal with it inside of ourselves, it wouldn't bother us. And of course, it doesn't bother me because I've done enough of this inner work that I know that this person has to go through this. So I stopped my lecture. I went over, pulled up a chair, sat down in front of her, and said, "It's okay. Just feel it." And she goes, "I want my body back. I was so athletic and blah, blah, blah. And then I had this accident. Now I've got all these problems and I can't do the things I used to do. And I blah, blah, blah. And I just get this grief. And that's it. Go with, just feel it." And as soon as I gave her permission to cry, and I said it was okay, go ahead. You need a good cry, whatever. The whole room relaxed. Why? Because everybody in that room can feel with her that part of themselves that has experienced grief and loss and pain. Okay? And I'm saying it's okay. It's okay. And they're all hearing the message, it's okay. It's not just affecting her, it's affecting everybody else in the room. This is the miracle of what happens when we do workshops, because every person who goes through this process, everybody else in the room can relate to what they're going through. And it's a healing, and every healing session is a healing process for everyone, not just a healing process for the person who's undergoing it, including me, by the way. All right. And after she cried, you should have seen the change in her countenance. Before she'd been deathly pale, and she looked, and her countenance brightened, and her face was glowing, and blah, blah, blah. And all these reassuring comments came back from other people in the room, and so on and so forth. And she got this love and appreciation. And she burst through that negative self and got in touch with something inside of her that was real, that went beyond what she was experiencing, that real or higher self. She didn't have any kind of divine experience or whatever, but she started to feel a peace come over her. And this happens over and over again. A person starts to feel a peace come over them. They get in touch with a resource inside, some aspect of themselves starts bringing comfort and reassurance and so forth. But you can't get there without acknowledging the crap that's in between you and that. Right? I hope I'm making sense with this. All right. And so this is the model that is really the core model of emotional healing. And my belief is that you can't, I know lots of people who do emotional healing, and all of them, and almost anybody who's ever told me I do emotional healing, and because I'm very interested, I'll let people do what they do on me. I've had people do tapping on me. I've had people do a whole bunch of different techniques on me. And the way I tell whether they're really doing emotional healing work or not is because I get in touch with my feelings quite easily. And if I start to get teary-eyed, or I start to, feel a little bit of anger or discomfort in me, the people who are just doing a technique, trying to erase the painful memory and make it go away, like a Band-Aid or a drug to make the person feel better, they get kind of nervous. I can see them get nervous, like, and they start, tap harder, do the thing, blah, blah, blah. They're afraid. They're terrified of the emotion I'm showing. And with me, it's totally different. We did a workshop here in St. George, and this lady, and I don't even remember what came up for her. All I remember is it came up, this pain. Again, something had happened to her. She'd been through all this really difficult stuff and so forth. And she'd started to experience physical health problems because of what she'd been through emotionally. And I just basically just sat there, and when this started to come up for her, I just sat in front of her, smiled, encouraged her to go there, blah, blah, blah. She's crying. She's expressing all this emotion and so forth. And when we got done, and she got this relief, which, by the way, after that class, her physical body, some of her physical health problems started to change. And she's since done some emotional healing work with some of my interns, and told them that she got more progress in the first session she did with them than she did in 10 years of counseling. She'd been in counseling for 10 years, I think, this woman. Assuming I'm thinking is the right person, but whatever. The main point of the story is this, that this guy said, how could you do that to her? You're smiling, and she's in pain, and you're causing all this pain in her. I said, no, I'm not. All that pain was inside of her. I'm smiling because she's finally getting it out, and we're draining it off. And I'm happy for her. I'm happy for her. And that's what happens when you start to understand this work. When someone cries or get angry or whatever, and you're there just to support them and help them wade through that feeling, that emotion, and you can do it with a loving smile on your face because you know that all that stuff was inside of them, and it's like lancing a wound, pus-filled wound, and you're draining it out, or you're digging out the sliver, or you're cutting out the tumor, or whatever you want, the analogy you want to do, and they're going to get well. I wasn't causing her pain. She'd been in pain for years, and all that pain was bottled up inside of her in that middle world. And I was just letting it come out, letting her face it, and then come back to the place of peace inside. Children do this naturally. They get angry for a few minutes, and then they go back to being happy. They get sad for a few minutes, they go back to being happy. We're the ones who tell them, don't be angry, don't be sad, and then we get them stuck in those emotions, because now they can't just cry and get over it, or get angry and get over it, or be afraid and get over it. They gotta hold it inside and pretend they don't feel that way because mom and dad says it's wrong for me to feel that way. I believe every single person on this planet can identify with what I'm saying, because this is what we all go through, being invalidated for this feeling self inside of ourselves. By the way, this is just a little thing showing that I saw that this pattern was mirrored in the iris. I'm an iridologist. It just was at the iridology conference, and this is mirrored in the way the pattern reads in iridology. Also, there's a thing of iridology called radiant iridology that deals with personality, And there's 3 types, and this is important for tonight's message. 3 basic types: a jewel type, which has little pigments or dots of color in the eye; a flower type that has these little rounded openings called lacuna; and then a stream type that has just very nice straight eye fibers. And then you also have a mixed types, which mix up some of those characteristics, because nobody's purely one of these 3 things. But the jewel is a mental type, primarily living in the world of their head. The flower is an emotional type, primarily living in the world of their heart. And the stream is a physical type, primarily living in the world of their body and processing life through those avenues. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I found that different people process through this differently depending on whether they're a mental, emotional, or a physical type, whether they're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. And so here are the 3 primary ways people access this. And I'm telling you this so that you understand that one technique is not enough to work with everybody. You've got to be able to help someone access this on whatever is the easiest way for them to get through it. The mental types process this visually. They're the ones that have what I call symbolic journeys, or they actually go back and remember very vividly, visually remember experiences from their life. Now, I'm not normally visual. My 2 most powerful emotional healing experiences were visual, but most of my experiences in this work for me have not been visual. They've been more auditory and kinesthetic. One of the reasons why those 2 are so powerful for me is because they're so unusual for me. The easiest way to help someone access the past, if they're a visual person, well, there's two ways to do it. One is just say, something comes up and you tell them, like they're starting to tell you about something happened in childhood. And you say, go back and be that child. Go back and put yourself back in that scene. Remember that, and feel what you felt when you were there. What did it feel like to be there? What were you feeling? You literally go back and try and encourage them to relive the experience. That's if it's readily apparent that there is an experience that they're trying to process, and that you can have them directly connect with that way. If there isn't, then you use a visual tool to help them do this. And the one that I learned that I've used the most, it's not the only thing you could do, but this is a nice one, is I tell people, picture a hallway with many doors. And the hallway is leading back through your life, back to the time that you were born, okay, or even when you were in the womb. And each door represents an experience you've had in your life. I want you to start walking down that hallway until you come to a door that intrigues you, and open the door and tell me what you see. I remember the first time I tried this particular technique, the lady opened the door and I said, what do you see? She says, it's a torture chamber. And she described these instruments of torture in the room. And I said, so what is this about? She says, it's my first marriage. Now that's a really interesting visual. Okay, understand this is a symbolic journey. Okay, the person is facing in a symbolic way what they went through. The torture chamber symbolizes her feeling of that first marriage, that this partner, from their wedding night started to literally torture her, do things to her that made her unhappy and miserable. And and so I tell people, how do you feel, so on and so forth. I try to get them in touch with the feelings and what's going on inside of them about this visual image. And sometimes this will lead to a whole storyline that they start following. When a person gets into a symbolic journey, they go through all this. And I'll tell you later ways of guiding people through symbolic journeys. But it's always important with all 3 of these things to keep coming back to And how did you feel? And what did you feel? What was going on inside of you emotionally when you do this? Or when you're looking at the scene, what's going on inside of you emotionally? And the look for the light metaphor, look for a light in this scene. Find a light somewhere in this scene, in this situation that happened in your life, or this situation that you're seeing symbolically. Look for the light. Is a good way to get them to perceive this. Now, I'm mostly auditory. Most of my spiritual messages come from a still small voice that I hear, not in my head, but like in the center of my being. It almost feels like I'm hearing it from my heart. Like my heart, some little voice in my heart is talking to my head and telling it things, okay? The scriptures call that the still small voice, because you can only hear it when you get quiet, when you shut off the monkey chatter in your brain and you stop letting all that mindless going on in your head, so that you calm your mind down, let your mind be serene, and then you can hear that voice. And one of the ways when you do this with someone who's more auditory, you directly go into the emotional world. They're much more in touch with their emotional world. What are you feeling? And a feeling is always a bodily sensation. So if they say they're feeling something, say, where do you feel that? If they don't know where they're feeling it, they're looking at it mentally. They're not looking at it emotionally. And you need to say, tell them, a feeling is a bodily sensation. If it's a feeling, where in your body do you feel this feeling? And when they identify the place where they're feeling that feeling, you want them to be present with the feeling. You want them to breathe with the feeling. So maybe, I'm feeling sad. Well, where are you feeling sad? I don't know. Okay, sadness is a bodily sensation. Breathe. Feel your body. Feel your sensations. Where are you feeling sadness? Right here. Okay, put your hand right there. Past, I often put my hand there. You have to be careful not to touch people in inappropriate ways, but I might just put my fingers like this, over the heart area. You say, feel that. Just breathe into it. Feel that. I tend to now just have them put their hand on that place where they feel the feeling. I say, breathe into it. Just feel it. Let it be. If they start to cry, it's okay. Let the tears come. Be present with that feeling. And I encourage them to go in and engage with the emotion. And then there's a technique we use called question affirmation technique, which we'll talk about later, which is you find the negative belief associated with that feeling and you change it into the opposite. Like, I'm not worthy, I'm unloved, whatever. And then you change that into, well, what would it feel like if you were loved? What would it feel like if you were worthy? What would it feel like if you were smart? What would it feel like if, and you have them, what would it feel like if? And that's actually a way of also a way of accessing auditory things. And eventually what happens is you're able to connect a good feeling with a new belief system, and a transformation takes place. Again, kinesthetics are the most interesting and the most dramatic of all access doorways, because you directly go straight to the body, like, I've got a pain in my abdomen or whatever, or I've got this pain in my body, or this, or you do the muscle testing, which I teach in the emotional anatomy, and find out where they're blocked, and you have them tune into that part of your body and feel it. Okay. And when they, it's again, a feeling, sensation, processing. Be present with pain, breathe into it, feel it. And with them, it is typically that they need to move with the feeling, like maybe their body wants to shake, or maybe they want to clench their fists and I say, and you'll watch, and their body will be moving. They'll be twitching. I say, what is your arm wanting to do? Okay, it's going like this. What does your arm want to do? What does your arm want to do? Okay, and they're blocking the expression of the feeling through the body, you see, and you get them to do that. I've had people, I remember one time, a lady who, was remembering something very, very painful, that I think, I've had people go back and remember things that happened to them in the womb. And when they do this, they'll often curl up into a little ball in the fetal position. I've seen people shake and tremble with fear. I've seen people like, kick their legs. I've seen people, scream, do all kinds of physical. This is very dramatic. And if you're scared of it, again, this is something that a lot of psychologists would say, oh, you don't let it happen. I let it happen as long as they're not hurting themselves or anyone else. Okay. If they're looks like they're going to hit, I stopped one lady when she started hitting herself. I said, I'm not going to let you hit yourself. But you let them move with the feeling. And what this is that part of what the process of what stops. And by the way, there's stuff that you can do. And again, all this is part of the class. I'm just giving you kind of an overview. You get this tension in your body to hold in the emotion, because emotions want to move the body. They want to express themselves through the body, punching someone, kicking them, crying, or whatever. And when you're inhibiting your emotions, you create muscle tension that acts as armor, body armor. And this is actually something that happens that dissolves the body armor, that is locking the emotion in the body and locking the emotion into the structure of the body. And you're letting it discharge through the body, and then the muscle tension goes away and the person has amazing relief. And what will happen is, in a lot of cases, you'll get a combination of these things happening. Maybe a person is going on a symbolic journey, but then they have a kinesthetic experience where they tremble, or they get angry, or they shout, or they express something and discharge something kinesthetically. So I'm just giving you this as an overview to help you understand that there's 3 aspects of this. Someone commented, that they hadn't had any visual experience, but this is because everybody is going to process this in their own way. And you let them process it in their own way. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It's about them. And this is a journey they take. That's why I originally called it emotional facilitation, because it was the best thing I could figure to call it, because it was like a midwife. The midwife isn't giving birth. The midwife is coaching the mother to give birth. It's the mom who's doing all the work, and it's the person you're working with who's doing all the work. You're just the coach. You're just encouraging them, giving them a little help and nudging to keep going inward and keep confronting the demons in that middle world and deal with them, instead of running away from them or trying to avoid them. Because try to avoid them and they'll never, ever, ever, ever go away. They'll only go away when you actually get the courage to go and confront them, which allows you to move through them and past them and get rid over them. Just as another example, this lady with this anxiety, incredible anxiety. Someone asked me to work on her, and I said to her, feel the anxiety. She said, I feel this anxiety. I said, feel it right now. Feel it. Just feel it. Don't fight it. Just let your body just be overcome with anxiety. Don't try to block it. Don't try to whatever. Just feel it. Well, she started trembling. She started shaking, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, her body relaxed. She says, I feel better. She looked at me and she says, you knew that was going to happen, didn't you? I said, yeah. Because when we're fighting our feelings, we strengthen them, perpetuate the negative emotion. When you kind of surrender and let it flow through you, it just like it discharges. Okay? I don't know how to explain it. I call them emotional dams. Basically, you've created all this muscle tension in your body that's holding on to all this, emotional energy that you can't discharge or let go of, because you're trying to keep your facade up so that you will appear nice to other people, because if you cried or you got angry or whatever, they'd all be upset with you. So you've got to hold on to all this stuff. And then when you find a way to release it where there's no judgment or whatever, it kind of flows out of your body, and then you can get in touch with what's really bothering you. Once I learned to do this, I do it with myself all the time. I kind of got angry today over something, and I had to let myself in the car have a little bit of a acknowledge it. Okay, ticked off. Because if you don't acknowledge it, you can't do anything about it. If you don't own it, you can't solve it. All right. So that's I'm gonna come back out of the slides here. Stop the slides. That's kind of an overview of the whole process. Like I said, I was a teaching class once, and one of the people who'd done quite a few emotional healing sessions with me was there with me, and someone said something about my technique, and my friend piped up and said, "Stephen has no technique." she says you have to understand that all the techniques he's talking about, no two sessions with him are ever the same. It's very unique for every person. Because I'm not trying to do a technique. A technique is like, have you ever had a massage where you've got a mechanical massage therapist who's just rubbing your body? Okay, now it's time to do the arm. Now it's time to do the shoulders. Now it's time to do blah, blah, blah. And they aren't present with what they're doing, right? They're just rubbing your body. And then you get a massage therapist who's tuned into you, and she comes and finds that spot that's tender and starts working on it, and like tunes into what's going on in your body. And in order to do this, you've got to be able to do that with other people. You've got to be alive to the moment, present with them, and adapt to whatever the situation is. And like I said, I learned all this, praying my way through it and listening to the little voice inside saying, well, do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. Because I didn't know any of these techniques when I started. I didn't know the models. I didn't know anything. I was just literally just following my intuitive guidance, with the only thing I knew is I needed to help this person go within. And they get stuck and I couldn't get anywhere. And I get this idea, we'll try this. And then boom, we have a breakthrough. So what I'm trying to teach to help you understand is it's not a technique. It's a spiritual journey that's a little different for every person, and you have to be alive to that difference. Now, this means that you've got to learn to a certain extent to start trusting yourself. So I'm just going to play a little YouTube video. And this relates to what I talked about 2 weeks ago, about standing in the unconditional love of God. And it kind of blowing away some of the things I'd believed up to that point, because you have to get over the idea that there's this judgmental, punishing God who is looking at all your faults and shortcomings and everything and wants to condemn you for it. That's not what Jesus didn't come into the world to condemn the world. He came into the world to save it. Okay. And he saves it through his unconditional love that brings us back to our Father, brings us back to our daddy, our heavenly daddy, who loves us unconditionally, who wants to help us, who's there for us, just waiting for us to acknowledge that we need his help, that we can't do this ourselves, that we need his help. So this is the little video I want to play for you.
As a child born in his image, with the spirit of righteousness and discernment, I will discard all of man's doctrines and discern all truth on my own, with my Father at my side. I will let nothing go by under the radar of discernment. Our Heavenly Father's perfect character will guide me in the calibration and measurement of any and all subjects presented to me. Our Father's character is holy. Just. Pure. Divine. And most importantly, His love is unconditional. If any letter deviates from our Heavenly Father's perfect character, it's a lie. Thank you, Father, for our spirit of righteousness and discernment.
Okay, so hope you got that message. There are all kinds of voices in the world, judgmental, punishing, criticizing, whatever voices. But the voice of our Father, of our Creator, is one of unconditional love. We have to stop listening to the other voices. We have to start believing that we can overcome, with His help, anything. But we first have to acknowledge or face the fact that we have a problem. You cannot solve a problem until you have identified and owned it. If you're just trying to ignore it, make it go away, it's just like you have this persistent symptom in your body of an ache or a pain or whatever. It's trying to get your attention. It's trying to tell you you need to do something. Something's wrong. You need to go, figure out what's going on in your body, how, what you're doing to your body that's not healthy or whatever, and fix it. You can take a drug to mask the pain or to cover up the symptom, but it never fixes the problem. And it's the same thing with our emotions. You can try to numb them. You can try to run away from them. You can try to do all these things, but they will never go away until you are willing to go inside, listen, and own, hey, I've got this problem. I've got this difficult. I've got this pain inside of me from childhood and from things that people did to me and whatever. And I need help. I need help to go through this. And it is that process of that inward journey and the acknowledgement of that then leads you to be able to go to the next step and receive the help. Because what I found over and over again, as long as you're in denial, as long as you're trying to run away from it, as long as you're not owning it, as long as you're blaming it on other people, you will never get to the place where you're being genuine and real and can get the problem solved. And we've spent a lifetime learning to dodge this stuff. It takes some real effort to overcome it. Now, I want to go back just briefly to this one slide before I play this last video. I want to go to this slide of the three selves. Okay, this one right here. People are just hungry to discharge this stuff in the negative self and terrified to let other people see it, yet hungry for someone who can show them enough love to help them look at that and deal with it and work through it. Because that real, genuine, beautiful person inside them is longing to be seen, to be known, to be understood, to be loved, to be discovered. We're all longing for that. We're all longing for someone to just unconditionally accept us. And unfortunately, none of us are perfect enough or loving enough or holy enough to give that wholly to each other. But we can guide each other, help guide each other back to the source of that unconditional love that just sees us for who we are and loves us for who we are and cares about us and gives us that thing that our soul most desires. But we can be helpful in the process. And that's what the emotional healing is all about, of a person going there. We can't give it to them because we are incapable in and of ourselves of generating that. I'll talk next week about how we can become conduits of it, but my little self can't do it, okay? Only God can do it. And God can do it through me, but I can't do it. if that makes sense. So I have a theme song for emotional healing work that I discovered 20 years ago. And I'm going to play the video. I made a little music video of it to play for you. And I hope that you will enjoy it, because it says to me what this work is all about. I start off, when I do emotional healing work, looking at this person, believing in that real self inside, believing that the person I'm talking to is a child of God, that God absolutely unconditionally loves them, that there's nothing wrong with them except their own self-limiting beliefs that are holding them back from expressing the beautiful person they are, that all that negative stuff in their life is actually holding them back. It's not who they really are. I'm seeing past all that to the wholeness of the person within. And asking God to make me a conduit so that I can guide them to his unconditional love. And with that in mind, I want to end tonight with playing this video of my emotional healing theme song. And I hope you'll watch this and really ponder what it's saying more than one time. So here we go. Play.
When I'm seen, my eyes will shine like stars upon the snow, casting forth the shadows inside my heart. When I'm seen, my beauty shall not blind, it shall bring light bound by heaven. When I'm seen, when I'm heard, my voice will cry across the sky, setting free the me that's locked inside my heart. When I'm heard, won't have to hide my truth with lies, and you'll hear the songs of angels. When I'm heard, when I'm loved, I won't bow down to fear no more, and I'll know the flow that moves inside my heart. When I'm loved, I'll feel the joy God has in store for the new creation. When I'm loved, oh, when I'm wrong, no devil win, gonna scatter my soul. Oh,
Not sure why when I play these videos, it's hard for me to get the sound to come on immediately, but so you may have kind of missed the first part of it. When I'm seen, my eyes will shine like stars upon the snow, casting forth the shadows inside my heart. When I'm seen, my beauty shall not blind. It shall be light, browned by heaven when I'm seen. When I'm heard, my voice will cry out across the skies, setting free the me that's locked inside my heart. When I'm heard, I forget that part. When I'm heard, okay, I can't remember that part. But then it goes on. When I'm loved, I won't bow down to fear no more. That's a beautiful line. When I'm loved, I won't bow down to fear no more. I'll walk and talk the love that's inside my heart. When I'm loved, I'll know the joy God has in store for the new creation when I'm loved. When I'm known, my sword and shield will melt away. The thing that we're constantly trying to protect and defend ourselves, truly feel known, all that melts away, right? And I walk and talk the love inside my heart. When I'm known, I'll fall down on my knees and pray with a sigh of sweet surrender when I'm known. When I'm found, what's being found? The divine child of God that's locked up inside of us, that's trapped with all this judgment and fear and everything else being held down and stopped and held back. Okay? When I'm found, my shackles all will be unbound, and my roving soul will come home inside my heart. When I'm found, I'll come to know the grace of God profound. There'll be no more need to wander when I'm found. Absolutely beautiful song. And that's what that expresses to me so beautifully in song, what this work is all about. It's helping people to be seen, to be heard, to be loved, to be known, and to be found. So thank you all for being here. Okay. All right, let me see if there's any comments or questions to have. Someone says, unconditional love video, can't wait to share my church buddies. Yeah, well, yeah, and so that is up on YouTube. I have a link to it. It's copyrighted material, but I found after I uploaded it, they said it was okay. I just had to add, I monetize it with ads so that the copyright owner can make some money off the ads. Anyway, but you feel free to share the video. There's a link to it also in the class page, as well as a link to the other video about judging everything by our Father's character of holiness, purity, love, and so forth. Are there any questions or comments? I'm little. I always get teary-eyed when I think about that video. I play it for classes all the time, and it still touches me or moves me because I've just seen that process happen so many times and seen that thing of setting people free and helping them, find this thing inside of themselves, learn to start judging things from the light of God, not from the so forth. I don't have a place to get the lyrics of the song. I do have a version of the video, and I will put it up on the class page where I've actually I have the words go across the bottom of the screen so you can read them as it's playing. So I'll post that up as well, so you can actually look at that version. It's not the version I post on YouTube, but I'm going to post it so you actually can see the words, because I know sometimes I have a hard time understanding the words the song is playing. So that's why I created a version of that, and I make sure it's up. Okay, well, that's all the messages. The first two lessons, you can get the lessons that if you previously missed the other lessons, they're on YouTube. I sent out an email to everybody who has registered for this class. I sent it out again today. These are up on my YouTube channel, Herbal Education on YouTube, and you can get them. We also have a class page at our Student Learning Center at modernherbalmedicine.com. If you've taken a class from us before, you can log in there and you can self-enroll in the course and get handouts and access to other resources, or you can set up an account if you've never taken class for us, and then go in and self-enroll, and there's a little YouTube video up there. If you haven't got those, email me at abcherb@mac.com, because some email servers block the emails that I send out in bulk from our email server. And so if that has happened to you, just send me a message at abcherb, abcherb@mac.com, and I'll send you the link directly to the video and to the YouTube channel, so you can watch the lessons that you missed. But just have to email me, and then I'll send the stuff to you so you can do this. Yeah, and one of our students has has created a Facebook group, and also I have a Facebook group called The Heart's Key, which I'm going to also post all this stuff on that Facebook group too. So you'll be able to get this. Someone says, I've used the analogy, have you ever wanted to cry, get a ball of energy in your throat, and then swallow it? That's what we do a lot, is we swallow our emotions and we hold them inside, and we learn not to acknowledge them. So that's what this is all about. Well, thank you for participating tonight. I've gone a little bit over time. I try to hold these to an hour, but the email address again is, I'm going to type it in, is abcherb@mac.com. That's my personal email address. That's the best email address to email me at. You can also email me at webinars@treelight.com. Please, no, that's not, I spelled that wrong. Webinars@treelight.com. And yeah, please put like attention emotional healing class, because I, like many of you, get like over 100 emails a day, and it's easy to overlook an email when I'm going through trying to delete all of the junk emails I don't want, if I don't have something that calls my attention to it. So just put in, attention emotional healing class, and I'll be sure to respond. That the webinars@treelight.com is probably a better one to email, because that goes into a special box for students in classes. All right, everyone, thanks again for everyone for joining us, and I'll see you again next week, and it will be next week, okay? Where we have lesson 4, which is about the one-ment of God. Good night.